After last year's outbreak of ginger blight disease, farmers find hope in the form of a scheme providing inputs worth about $1 million to help them start again.
Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima calls for reforms to lift people out of poverty and help catalyze economic growth.
A Frenchman living in Senegal takes to social media teaching the Wolof language he's fallen in love with.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from the Voice of America in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
Vice President Kashim Shettima says Africa needs reforms that will help catalyze growth and lift its people out of poverty. Nigeria's Vice President was speaking at the African Caucus meeting in Abuja, advised the African leaders to focus on policies that will shape the collective agenda of the continent's economic growth, development and prosperity. Our business correspondent, Sarah Achimugu, reports.
This is the first time Nigeria will be hosting the African Caucus, a meeting of African finance ministers and central bank governors. Top government officials, representatives of development finance institutions, and key players in the finance sector are also attending the event. The meeting is being held amidst the need to close the poverty and inequality gaps, which continue to pose a challenge to growth.
Our ambition is to consistently grow at 7.8% per annum in order to lead our people out of poverty.
To navigate this complex landscape and set the continent on a path of sustainable economic growth, we must leverage the support of our global partners.
Global public debt reached $303 trillion in 2023, causing a heavy burden on developing economies. According to UN statistics, over a fifth of tax revenue in 25 developing countries was spent on servicing external debt, leaving around 3.3 billion people paying more on interest than on health or education.
The use of this technology, not only in trade, but in improving procurement and good governance generally, does require building human and legislative capacity across the continent.
An estimated $9 billion in additional trade can be unlocked through liberalizing trade on the continent, as envisaged under the African Continental Free Trade Area.
The Vice President, Kashim Shettima, declares the meeting open.
No matter how long the night is, it must give way to the light of the dawn. Stormy, the weather might well be, but it won't rain forever. We have crossed the Rubicon. The president took the painful bullet. Reforms are inevitable.
The African Caucus, established in 1963, comprises finance ministers and central bank governors from across the continent. It aims to strengthen the voice of African leaders in the Bretton Woods institution on development issues which are crucial to Africa. Sarah Chimugu, Channels Television News.
Joining us on the program today is the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, Mr. Muda Yusuf. A pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you very much, Joke. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So what specific reforms do you think should be proposed to address poverty and stimulate economic growth in Nigeria?
I think the emphasis that the Vice President was trying to underscore is the need to make economic policies people-oriented. Yes, we have economic objectives, but we also have social objectives. And there's a need to ensure a balance between the two, especially in the light of the experience of recent past in many countries. I'm talking about protests by citizens around issues of hunger, issues of high cost of transportation, access to education, access to health, issues of inequality. So these parameters or variables are very, very important when we talk about economic policies. So the point I think the VP is trying to stress is that as we pursue these macroeconomic objectives to stabilize inflation, to ensure GDP growth and all of that, we should have an inclusive approach, emphasizing the need to address the social outcomes of economic policies. So that where economic policies are creating social problems, like problems of hunger, problems of inequality, problems of access to education and health, there's a need, to tweak such policies.
A lot of people, in communities, especially hard-to-reach areas, people that live in non-urban areas, are left out of a lot of things when it comes to economic development. How do you think this plan will increase economic and financial inclusion for marginalized communities?
Well, economic inclusion is about impacting a larger portion of the population. And one of the ways I think we can do it is to identify sectors where we have more economic operators, sectors that engage a lot more for our people across the continent. And one of such sectors is agriculture. So to make an economy a lot more inclusive, I think a great deal needs to happen around investment in agriculture, because quite a number of the population are involved in agriculture. So apart from the employment benefits that investment in agriculture brings, it also brings the advantage of ensuring food security, and which will help to minimize social tension, issues of hunger, protests, and all of that. Another segment of the economy I think governments in Africa need to address is the SMEs and micro enterprises. The SMEs account for close to 90% of jobs and employment on the African continent, and in fact, in many parts of the world. So if we are looking at achieving the objective of inclusion, which is very necessary to ensure social stability, we should be looking at supporting in very pragmatic and impactful ways, supporting the SMEs, supporting the informal sector, supporting the medium enterprises, and ensuring that there is proper linkage between the small business and the large enterprises. That way, we'll have been able to achieve a great deal as far as the objective of economic inclusion is concerned. I think that is the way to go.
Right, and with this latest, suggestion that you have made, do you see potential challenges or obstacles in these proposed reforms?
Well, of course, there will always be challenges. What is important is for us to quickly identify those challenges and, come up with ways and strategies to mitigate those challenges. One of the challenges is political will, to achieve this very, very important objective of economic inclusion and, having a people-oriented policies. So the political will has to be there. Then the interrogation of, orthodox economic policies is also important. Because in many African economies, what we have seen is that the adoption of this economic policy orthodoxy has been creating a whole lot of challenges, for social stability, for economic inclusion. So as we progress with economic reforms across the continent, it is important that at the same time, we continually interrogate the impact of those policies on the social lives of the people, on the welfare of the people, so that continually we can adjust those policies to ensure that we tweak the policies to ensure that we also simultaneously or concurrently achieve social objectives alongside. Then there's also the possibility of the challenge of financing, of funding. Funding is an issue across the continent. But what is important in this instance is to ensure that we get the priorities right. Because when we are talking about people-oriented policies, sometimes you may need to trade off some of the revenue. So if you need to scale down some expenditure, maybe capital expenditure that you spend in the urban areas, building bridges and all of that, in order to address these social issues that will bring down the cost of living, that will ensure better access to education, better access to health, improvement in the rural areas, connecting the rural economy to the cities, those things should be given a lot more priority.
Well, thank you very much, CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Mr. Muda Yusuf. Thank you for your time today on the program.
Thank you very much, Joke. Thank you.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, in a country where being gay is a crime, the Kenyan LGBTQ community claims social media platforms are being used to trap victims into blackmail, extortion, and assault. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. In Kenya, where same-sex relationship is a crime punishable by up to 14 years imprisonment, the only option for the LGBTQ community to meet is through dating apps and social media. But now LGBTQ Kenyans claim that these very platforms are being used to trap victims into a web of blackmail, extortion, and physical and sexual assault. Juma Majanga reports from Nairobi.
Kelly Matthew Muteti is making his way to the Milimani Law Courts in Nairobi on a quest to seek justice. The 37-year-old openly gay Muteti says he lost 500,000 Kenya shillings, equivalent to about $4,000 plus other household items, when a man he met online and invited to his house drugged and robbed him. Muteti says he could not report the incident to police for fear of being prosecuted because of his sexual orientation. He says he was also fired from his job for raising the issue of his safety.
But if it's discovered that you have a different sexual orientation, one, the police will either jail you that point in time, or if you actually find someone who's slightly friendly, they'll try to investigate. They reach one stage, they ask for more money. So in essence, you lose more than you gain.
Same-sex relations are a crime in Kenya, punishable by up to 14 years imprisonment. According to GALC, the Gay and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya, social media and dating apps have provided generally safe spaces for members to meet and interact. But that is changing, says Kelly Kigera.
When you're meeting a fellow queer person or a gay person, they catfish you from the sites or from these applications. And then when you're going to meet them, you find that they're blackmailing you because of your sexual orientation or gender identity.
Kigera says GALC has recorded more than 1,000 cases of blackmail and extortion against their members in the last 12 months, up from 50 cases recorded previously over a similar period.
There is an aspect of us making people accountable. The people who are using this app are the people who own their applications, or the people who are more driven, even the police officers, to open doors for people to report so that people can have justice.
In February last year, Kenya's Supreme Court upheld the right of LGBTQ plus organizations to register in the country. The ruling has emboldened organizations like GALC to encourage their members to take some extortion and blackmail cases to court.
Only time our issues will ever be heard is when someone who has a lot of empathy, who listens to our cases, and doesn't view us for our sexual habits and view us for the lifestyle that we are human beings. That is the only time our court cases will be heard. Otherwise, for as long as we have heterosexual people who view us for the sexual habits we have, we will never have our cases heard.
A bill recently introduced in the Kenyan parliament seeks to increase the maximum punishment for anyone found guilty of same-sex relations from 14 years imprisonment to death. Juma Majanga, VA News, Nairobi.
The Benue state government in north-central Nigeria is warning against laxity in contract execution, which often leads to contract variation. The executive chairman of the Benue State Universal Basic Education Board, Mrs. Grace Adagba, gave the warning during the bid's opening ceremony for the utilization of the UBEC-SUBEB matching grants held in Makadi, the Benue state capital.
Stakeholders in the education sector, contractors and anti-graft agencies gather for the financial bid opening of the joint contract awards by the Benue State Universal Basic Education Board in partnership with the Universal Basic Education Commission. The process is to enable the Benue Board carry out projects such as construction of school buildings, renovation of classroom blocks, hostels, digital and non-digital libraries. The Director of Physical Planning leads the unveiling process as the box is publicly opened, followed by the opening of individual bids.
We began this process by advertising these projects, including locations and coordinates of the project. If I have taken time to study past records, I have compared our records with the neighboring states and other states in Nigeria, you will discover that Benue State is the only state that have advertised projects with coordinates and locations.
Our mandate is to prevent economic and financial crimes. 1. 2, to investigate in the event there is a breach. 3, is to prosecute. And prosecution is, if we succeed, then the consequence is jail.
The board says it is partnering with the Universal Basic Education Commission and the State House of Assembly to ensure thoroughness and transparency.
This is the first time that the bidding process has been very open. And I have said before now that since the process has been failed, let it continue this way so that everyone that is deserve to win the contract will do so.
The contractors have promised to keep the terms in the contract to ensure that the government gets value for money.
It's time for a short break. As we do, we remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. And still to come, aid agencies walk to raise awareness on human trafficking.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. A recovery intervention scheme for ginger farmers in Nigeria could help mitigate losses suffered last year due to the outbreak of ginger blight disease caused by fungi. Authorities say the disease affected about 2,500 hectares of farms in 7 local government areas in Kaduna State, leading to nearly $7 million in losses. The scheme provides farmers with inputs worth about $1 million to help them start again in the new farming season. Authorities say Nigeria's ginger production could add $6.3 billion to Nigeria's GDP by 2030, but that projection is now threatened.
Last year, Nigerian farmer Paul Solomon Abui planted 1 hectare of ginger on this farm in Kachia in northwest Kaduna State. But in July, the ginger blight disease struck without warning, and none of his rhizomes made it.
I can expect in over 400 bucks or 500 bucks that I was expected, but at the end, nothing.
The disease causes the rotting of underground rhizomes and makes the plant wither. Like Abui, thousands of ginger farmers here are struggling to cope with the losses.
Some die, some fell sick psychologically. Like us, we feel it psychologically. We just maintain like something did not happen.
Nigeria is one of the world's top producers of ginger, competing with India and China. In 2021, the country produced nearly 1/6 of the global supply. Authorities estimate the outbreak cost about $6.5 million in losses and affected roughly 7,000 farmers, mainly around Nigeria's ginger hub in southern Kaduna State. This month, about 5,000 farmers began receiving seedlings, fertilizers, and agrochemicals from the government.
It's a two-pronged approach. What we are currently doing would bring about. One is that they are going on a crop rotation for their livelihood, sustenance to continue. What we've provided is for them to be able to plant maize and sorghum. On the other hand, we're also very hopeful that crop rotation would be able to break the chain of this disease.
We expect those things to come early, around April, so that by when you early planting give good result.
Officials say proceeds from ginger exports could add $6.3 billion to the country's economy by 2030. But farmers say with limited government intervention, they could be waiting for a long time if they get lucky at all. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Kachia, Kaduna State, Nigeria.
Global aid agency Live Abundantly organization is lending its voice to challenges associated with human trafficking and the reduction of the vulnerability of victims as it held an awareness walk to mark the United Nations World Day.
It's not just a test of physical strength, but a road work commemorating the United Nations World Day against human trafficking. The recommended footwear is sneakers and any other gear to aid one's walk. So dressed in yellow t-shirts and blue caps, the awareness campaign against human trafficking kicks off with partners from the Live Abundantly organization, UN agencies and members of the civil society. The Live Abundantly founder highlights the needs to educate the community in order to tackle the issues of human trafficking.
We hope that through this walk, we educate the community and that we get all stakeholders, from parents to teachers to community members, national, regional and international, to make the protection of human beings, particularly children, a priority. We must address this issue head on. We cannot continue to walk year in, year out, and still the numbers continue to increase.
This year's theme focuses on children, and the message from NAPTIC is clear: to protect every child and save them from traffickers.
The 30th of July every year since the 2016, we have celebrated or commemorated the World Day Against Human Trafficking, a day where we come together as organizations, state and non-state actors. People prefer to use children because they can be controlled, but NAPTIP, the whole of Nigeria, is standing up to tell you this year, leave no child behind in the fight against human trafficking. That's our theme, and we're telling you that no child is a slave.
With several years of creating awareness, these aid organizations are reiterating the need to constantly raise awareness on human trafficking and accelerate urgent action to the human traffickers.
A young Frenchman who settled in Senegal a little over a year ago decided to master the local Wolof language. Now he's teaching it to other people on social media. Alison Fernandez has the story and Michelle Joseph narrates.
27-year-old Ludovic Baron has only been living in Senegal for a year, but he speaks Wolof fluently.
Hello, how are you? Is everything okay? Do you have fermented milk?
Yes.
Is your fermented milk good?
Yes. Give me 200 francs. It is surprising to see a Frenchman speak Wolof fluently, because most people who come from France to here only speak French.
In Senegal, most people speak Wolof, and Baron wanted to learn. And since he couldn't find enough online resources, he launched his own YouTube channel, Apprendre le Wolof. Now he makes short, humorous videos. Today, on the roof of his house, he's recording a video with his friend Babacar Ndao, a student and Wolof language enthusiast. Today's theme, colors.
Okay, merci Babacar.
What we try to do is allow Senegalese people to speak pure Wolof. For example, a person from Dakar might speak a sentence with an Arabic word, an English word and a Wolof word. We do research. We try to bring what is profound and allow people from Dakar to take ownership of it.
The videos are widely shared in different countries around the world, notably in France, where they are followed by many French people of Senegalese origin.
I often get this feedback, the fact that seeing a white person who can speak Wolof, at first they feel a bit of embarrassment. They say to themselves, he knows my parents' language while I don't. But then after the shame comes the motivation. They say to themselves that if someone has done it from scratch, I can do it too.
Between TikTok, YouTube and Instagram platforms, Ludovic already has more than 600,000 followers on his Apprendre le Wolof account, and the number keeps growing. Michelle Joseph for Alison Fernandez, VOA News in Dakar.
L'élève.
Dongobi.
La bibliothèque.
Kagu.
Les vacances.
Burgure.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.